Right, I think we'll start. Hello, everybody. I'm Frances Crook. I'm the Chief Executive of the Howard League for Penal Reform. And welcome to this In Conversation, this Howard League In Conversation with Caroline Adams, who's the Staff Officer for the National Children and Young Persons Portfolio at the National Police Chiefs Council, and she's also based in Sussex Police Force. Is sadly, like me, about to retire. So I hate to say this, but you're losing two good women. But welcome, Caroline. We've worked together for quite a few years, and it's been a very productive and useful experience. And we're very grateful to you for doing this event with us and talking particularly about police force and children, and young people, policing children. The first, I'm going to start by asking you to talk a bit about yourself, about what made you join the police force, what made you join the police service.
Thanks very much, and yeah, thank you for having me. It's an honour and a pleasure. I mean, I joined policing 35 years ago, so I've actually got to drag my mind back to think about the 19-and-a-half-year-old Caroline and what I was thinking at the time. And I think I'd left school, done my A-levels, left school, decided not to go to university, had enough of studying, and then didn't really know what to do. Got a job in an office and realised that wasn't what I wanted to do. I really didn't like that at all. And always had this idea and this desire to want to do something to make a difference. And thought, actually, I've always been interested in policing. I used to watch the cop shows that were on the telly at the time. I think I'm going to show my age here, but I think it was The Professionals probably, and found that, yeah, that looked quite exciting. So actually applied and joined, and then that's 35 years on, here we are.
And did you join Sussex Police Force? So tell me a bit about your career.
Yeah, so I've always been in Sussex. So as a probationer, I was posted at Crawley, which was quite a shock to my system, really. To find myself wandering around Crawley in the middle of the night on my own was a bit of a shock. I was like, really? Is this what happens as a police officer? And and it went from there. I then spent some time at Gatwick. I then spent some time at Hove working in the child protection team. I then spent some time neighbourhood teams, response, and then found myself as an officer who went into schools, and kind of the idea of working with young people was really started then. So I was a schools officer in Hove, going into the classroom, working with young people, trying to make a difference, trying to prevent them from becoming victims or offenders of crime, and then ended up at our headquarters in Lewes as a kind of schools resource officer, looking at trying to coordinate the role of those officers in Sussex and the resources that they used and the training that they had, and then it's gone on from there, really, and I've ended up sort of working nationally.
You have indeed. I mean, you took on the specialism of working with on children and young people with Olivia Pinnock when she was at she is still at Hampshire. So that was a particular interest of yours. How did you and Olivia get together? How did that happen?
Well, I suppose it's that interest of working with children and young people that, if I'm honest, really started when I was a probationer in Crawley, with just seeing young people that I was arresting as a shoplifter, and then I was arresting them in the back of a stolen car, and then I was arresting them because they were committing a burglary, and I remember thinking, surely someone's got to stop this happening. Surely we could do this differently. This journey and this pattern that I'm seeing here, surely we could do something about this. And I think that's where that interest started, of prevention has got to be better than this intervention, because this intervention isn't working. So we really need to get upstream and do something different. And I think really that really early kind of thought process around that then sparked the journey that I took through my career. And so working with children and young people, whether it was in child protection teams, neighbourhood policing, in schools, I sort of, that was what I wanted to do, with the idea of trying to prevent harm. And so actually it's kind of bringing that together. And then when Olivia Pinnock picked up the national police chief lead for policing of children and young people. I was sort of head of schools policing in Sussex, meddling around in everything to do with children and young people, you know, trying to get that preventative journey in place, trying to do something different. And she basically said, you know, come and work with me and let's look at what we can do nationally. And that's where that journey started, really.
And a formidable team you made, I have to say. Can you just explain, because I'm sure involved in this event are people who know a lot about policing, but there'll be also some people who don't quite know how the structure works. So could you explain a little bit about the National Police Chiefs Council and how the different leads for different issues work? What is the sort of power structure and how does it work out?
I'll give it a go. It's actually quite complicated.
Yes.
So there's 43 forces, and they've obviously all got their chiefs and their leads, but there's lots of areas of policing that you actually need to spend some time thinking about how we move forward, particularly. And rather than all 43 forces thinking about all aspects of policing, the idea of the Chiefs Council is that different chiefs take on a lead for different aspects of policing, and then they do the thinking and the progression and moving forward on behalf of UK policing in that area. So Olivia picked up the kind of children and young person portfolio. There's something like 300 different portfolios within the Chiefs Council. So it's a very complicated area. And in order to try and make sense of it, they sit within larger coordinating committees, of which there's 5 of those. So we sit within the Local Policing Coordinating Committee, along with other portfolios like response policing, local policing, mental health, antisocial behaviour, social media. So a real mixed bag actually within that Local Policing Coordinating Committee. And what we try to do is lead forward on behalf of UK policing on that aspect that we are the specialists within. So in our case, children and young people. So it's a complicated picture. There's lots of change happening at the moment within Chiefs Council to actually restructure it in a slight, to have more of a sort of a hub, which is more of a central resource for policing.
Interesting. And I want to talk particularly about how leagues work to end the criminalisation of children who live in residential care. And you were on our advisory board for that work. And we think it's been really impactful. And we put out a press statement today about how successful the work's been. So that the incidence of criminalisation of children in residential care, looked after children, has gone down by 1/3, which is very, very significant, because they were being criminalised and in massive numbers. And they're already, of course, vulnerable children. So I've got sort of several questions I want to explore on this. But first of all, why on earth were the police getting involved with children who are living in residential care? What was the problem? Why were the police being called?
Well, I think that's a complicated picture. I think some of the children living in residential care, because of the journey that they've experienced on their journey into care, are often really quite angry young people, and haven't always had the support that they need to understand and deal with their emotions. You know, sometimes the way they've been moved around has been really short notice, multiple moves. I mean, personally, I would find that would make me really angry if I didn't know where I was going to be or who I was going to be living with. So quite justifiably, but when that you know, that anger tips over and can often lead to violent behaviour, often children's homes would call the police as a kind of, we don't know how to manage this young person, we don't know how to deal with them, and the police would get called. And some of those young people are really challenging young people, you know, and in some of those cases, the care home staff would have really felt themselves at risk and being threatened, and so calling the police, they would have felt, was a final resort. And I guess the work that we've done with yourselves and with Lord Laming and his inquiry is really about making sure that all those low-level incidents that don't need to come to the police's attention, the sort of incidents that if it was my child in my home, we would deal with, and we wouldn't even think about calling the police to come and deal with, it's those kind of incidents. We needed to get rid of those incidents so that we were only being called where we were really needed, because actually it was extremely violent or extremely difficult for the care staff, because obviously, you know, we need to protect them as well. And I think that's where a lot of that success has been. So we've been able to kind of sift out all of those low level incidents.
Absolutely. I mean, when we started talking to police forces about it, they tell us stories about how they'd be called out 10 times a day, the children who were just being annoying. I mean, we know that all teenagers are annoying. That's part of the job description. But you're absolutely right. There were actually relatively few cases of children who were being really, really violent, or there was a problem. And I think one of the police forces told us they got so cross with it, they threatened to arrest the care home manager, not the children. That was quite a good response. I mean, I actually want to come on to this because what do you do? What do police forces do to stop residential care homes? Most of them are run by offshore companies. They're not local. They're probably understaffed. The staff are not well trained. They're not well managed. They're not well supported. But they're very profitable for the companies. There's a lot of profit in running these homes. But how do you stop them from criminalising children and using the police as a backup for their failing service, apart from arresting the care manager?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's all about engagement and relationship and training, really. I think it's about, I mean, you probably gather my whole theme is all about getting upstream, and that's another classic example, is about building relationship with the care home and actually talking to them, helping them, you know, making sure that they have got the right staff, level of staff on duty, and actually kind of giving the problem back to them as much as possible, trying to identify an escalation process within the care home. You know, I get that, as you said, some teenagers are really annoying, and I get that actually if you've got a relationship breakdown between a member of the care staff and that young person, and they can't get away from each other and they are stuck in that space 24/7, that is going to cause some issues and some friction and tension. So but that is the care home's responsibility to resolve. That's not a policing issue, that's a relationship issue. And I, you know, sometimes that can be really difficult, but I think that's about educating the care home to, you know, yeah, we're there to support and help, and we don't want anybody to obviously be hurt or injured, and we want to prevent that from happening, but they have a responsibility to manage those young people's behaviour that they've taken on themselves within their care home system. And that may be calling a different manager in, it may be calling other staff in, it may be all sorts of process that needs to happen before you actually call the police.
Yes. I wonder if you have any, I might be putting you on the spot here, but I wonder if you have any comment to make about the market in children, because that's what it's become, a market in looked after children. And some of the most vulnerable children in the country, who are desperately in need of love and support, but are yet being seen as a commodity for profit. And it's often dumped in areas, not Sussex particularly, but in areas where there's a lot of social deprivation and poverty anyway, because property is cheap there, housing and labour are cheap. So the marketisation of children in care, and it's actually being examined at the moment by the Care Review and by the Competition Authority and by the Commons Education Committee. Everyone started to look at this, and I think partly because of the work that you've been doing and the work that Howard's been doing. But I just wonder whether dealing with these private entities in this way, whose motivation is not like dealing with the local authority, which may be bureaucratic, but their purpose, they know what they should be doing. Whereas when you're dealing with a body whose primary purpose is the pursuit of profit, not necessarily the welfare of the children, whether that affects the way you police them.
I mean, that's a tricky question to answer. I mean, a personal view is and this may not be a popular view, but I don't think children's homes should be able to make a profit at the expense of the children that they're caring for. But you know, we're in an open market, so you know, I don't want to get involved in the politics. No, it wouldn't. It doesn't affect our policing, because you know, some of the best homes are being run by some companies, you know, that do make profit, but they actually run their homes really well and really effectively. So I don't think the two are necessarily exclusive, but I think for us it's about the care of the children. Do the children, you know, receive the right care? And we encourage forces to report any incidents where they are worried about the care of the children to Ofsted, because, you know, they're the people with the power in a sense over the homes. So I think it's a complicated world. It's a mixed world, but I guess our priority is the safety of the children and young people living there.
One of the issues that police forces raised with us a lot was children who would go missing, and they would call the police to try and find them. I mean, even though that they often knew where the kids were, they'd gone down to the local cafe. I mean, one of the homes we talked to, they said, oh, they keep going down to the local cafe because they've got the internet there, and we won't allow it in the home. Well, just put the internet in. You have to manage it, obviously for safety reasons, but also kids would want to go home. They want to go back to their mum, no matter what the circumstances are. They want to go back to their friends, particularly if they've been sent up to North Wales or the North East and they're Londoners, or, you know, the kids are being sent a long way from home and they think it's like another planet.
Yeah.
So they go missing. I mean, that's one thing, trying to get home. And the other thing with children going missing is, of course, the county line stuff, the exploitation of them. It sets real challenges for policing, particularly when you've got geographically delineated police forces looking after children like that. I mean, I don't know what whether you've got experience of, or what the sort of strategy is for policing the missing children.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously, you know, they're really vulnerable, and when you look at all the reasons they go missing, all that you've outlined, and also some because they just don't want to be in the home they're living in, you know. And so to add to your list, all really complex reasons, and fundamentally, I think I would probably run away too, for any of those reasons. So I think it's really difficult. I think for me, the solution has to be about the placement of young people and where they are placed, and also how you know, how they have access to the internet, to a mobile phone, to their family, friends, you know, the people that they want to see. What does that look like, and how is that managed? Will make a big difference in preventing those young people from running away and going missing, because so it's got to be about a overarching management of that young person in where they live, where, you know, how they have access to the people they want to see, and that, you know, it's really difficult if the people that they want to see are not good for them to see, and to telling a teenager in particular that actually, yeah, I mean, you know, most parents actually, you know, your teenagers have got friends that you think, oh, I prefer them not to be friends with that person maybe, but that's just life. So it's about how we manage that, and how, as professionals, what we've decided as a society is that the parents, because, you know, most young people come into care because of neglect issues and complex chronic, you know, issues, family issues in their homes, and we as a society have decided that actually we can do a better job looking after them than their parents can, and we can keep them safer. So it feels to me like we should be the best example of parenting that you've ever seen as a society. We should be able to get this right. We're paying professionals to do this better than parents who've had no qualifications, no course, no nothing. They're just parents. And yet we seem to keep getting it wrong. And that I find that really frustrating. I found that frustrating for the last 20 years, that we still seem to be stuck in this same place and not getting it right. And I'd love to see this area of work really move forward, because I think we owe it to the young people within our society that we decide we can look after more effectively than their parents.
That's absolutely powerful, very powerful, and I absolutely agree with you. I don't understand why we keep getting it wrong either, but I see of course, hardly we see the consequences when it goes tragically and you know, profoundly wrong, because the kids end up committing serious crimes or end up in the criminal justice system further down the line. Absolutely tragic. I want to get back to the policing of children, because the policing of children has changed radically, and you've made a significant contribution to that. over the past few years, when and I know you've been involved in preparing a new policy paper for the National Police Chiefs Council on child-centred policing, which I think, as you've said, it's been agreed, but it hasn't been published or distributed yet. But I wonder if there is anything you could tell us about this new next step, as it were, of child-centred policing, and how it's going to be embedded. So what does it look like, and how do you roll it out? So particularly with all these new police officers we're going to get.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's interesting. Before we kind of started, child-centred policing wasn't a phrase. You know, when we wrote the first national child-centred policing strategy, we actually called it the Strategy for the Policing of Children and Young People, which now you look at it and think, well, why didn't we straight away see that? But it took us a little while to realise that actually it's about putting the child first. So let's start with child-centred policing, where we put the child first, and then everything flows from that. And so we'd had the strategy in place for a year or so before we changed it to that, and that was back in 2015. And that, I think, moved policing a long way, because I think fundamentally officers join policing to make a difference. And when you actually say to officers, put the child, they're a child, put the child first, they get it. It makes sense to them, because you go, yeah, of course, okay, yeah, I know, I get that. So it's made massive progress. It's come a long way. And but we needed a new strategy. We needed to refresh that. We'd had that since 2015, and that's a long time for any strategy to be in place. But what do we need to do next? And in our last strategy, we talked about the UNCRC articles, and we talked about making sure that the rights of children were respected in the way that we police them. And so we were really keen to make that even more central to what we were doing next. So we did some work with UNICEF, and we approached the Children's Commissioner to see if we could work with her team to really speak to young people and ask children and young people what they wanted from policing. And that's where we started. So we did a large piece of consultation across the country, taking the UNCRC articles and asking young people what they meant for them. And we then found that if we mapped procedural justice theory, there are 4 key principles of procedural justice theory, which is trustworthiness, fairness, respect, and the voice of children and young people. Funnily enough, pretty much everything they told us mapped across those areas. And so what we've been able to do is come up with some key child-centred policing principles that actually give the voice of young people at the heart of it. And it's a kind of a map. I'm just going to hold it up, but we can send it to everybody. That's my map. No, I'm not expecting anyone to read that and go, oh yeah, that's it. But when it comes out, then hopefully you'll see what that means. But children we spoke to said, well, you don't listen to us. We try to, and especially those in the care system, say, actually you get called into my home, you listen to the carers, but you don't listen to me. You don't listen to what I've got to say. You're not interested in me. You've made your decision based on what the adults told you. And that really resonated. That kind of feedback is really, really essential. And young people said to us, why don't you just ask me what happened to me? Don't say, why did you do that? I don't know why I did that. Who can explain why you react in a certain way and why you do something? And certainly not when you're 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, even 25, to be fair. So actually, they said to us, ask us what's happened to us and we'll tell you what's happened, because young people are often really keen to tell their story, and they say, well, this is what's happened to me. And they said, listen to our point of view and take time to listen and talk to me. I'm not just going to spill everything out straight away. You've got to take some time to build that relationship. So all of that feedback is on our child-centred policing principles. And Chief Constable Joe Shiner presented that to Chiefs Council last week. They signed it off. Really happy that it's a really good piece of work. And then what sits behind that is a best practice framework, because this is a kind of a real broad brush principles. And it's like, well, how do you do this then? And what do we need to see in a force to know that they're putting a child-centered approach in place, and the child comes first. So we've developed that with our kind of leads across the country, and again, that's kind of that's in place too. So we then have a national kind of steering group and regional chief officer leads that they feed all of that in, and hopefully that's how it's going to be embedded going forward.
That's fantastic. When people are asking for a copy of the map, so somehow we'll make that available. Either we'll put it on our website if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or something there, because I think the more that people understand it, and the public understands it as well as police, so I think that'd be great. And just one other thing, that the CRC is the convention, UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, which everybody should be well versed in, because it is a great document. That was all really interesting. And the work that you were involved in with the Howard League on residential care grew out very much from our long campaign to reduce child arrests, which we've been working on for years, because under the Labour government, the police have been given arrest targets, and there was some talk about the current Home Secretary reintroducing them, but I think that was squashed by the police, so that's good. I like it when police squash Home Secretaries.
No
obviously, whoever they are, whichever political party they are. But I mean, you've worked alongside police forces, and we've been celebrating success at reducing child arrests by over 2/3, which has been really great. And it's a win for children, it's a win for communities, it's a win for the police. Now, my worry is that reduction might be overturned with a sudden influx of new and perhaps over-enthusiastic young police officers, young coppers. I mean, I know that the government's argument for building more and more prisons and more capacity for children in prison is because they're going to have more police. So more police means arresting more people, means sucking more people into the justice system, the penal system, the criminal justice system, and then they go through and end up in prison, whether that's appropriate or not often. So how do we work with police? What are the police doing to ensure that the over-enthusiasm of young, inexperienced officers doesn't result in more collars, particularly of children?
Well, I think it needs to be the right thing to do, and there needs to be an obvious path, which isn't necessarily arrest. Most young people that commit offences are lower level offences, and so it's about having the right intervention at the first point of notice that they come to our attention. And I think that having really good diversion activity and diversion intervention for that young person needs to be the route to preventing them from escalating, their behaviour escalating, and that's, I think, the key to moving forward and preventing further arrests. I think the message has got through to policing that actually you don't have to arrest a young person unless it's absolutely necessary and proportionate. So I think we're at that space. But how do we prevent that young person who is then committing a violent offence, who will be arrested, how do we prevent them from getting to that place is the next piece of work, I think. And I think that's all about, as I keep talking about, getting upstream and preventing problems escalating. It's about being able to assess threat, harm and risk at the point where that young person comes to the notice of the police, and actually really understanding what's going on for that young person. What are they living with? What does their life look like? What are the challenges that they're facing, which is pushing them into the arms of the police? And what can we do about doing something different to prevent that from escalating? I think is got to be the only way forward. And that is going to require, we can't do that on our own. We need the youth service, we need the interventions that will make a difference to those young people. And I think there's no surprise that some of this has happened since the reduction in the youth service. The cuts to the youth service through austerity, we have been biting, and actually there is often not much for some young people to do. There aren't places for them to go. So actually, I think that's got to have something to do with it.
I absolutely agree. And I'm living in a North London borough where the youth service has just, in the last few years, has just gone. There really isn't a youth service anymore, and there's very little for young people to do. I mean, apart from lockdown, obviously that's a different system. But different issue, but and I just wonder whether you think sometimes the police are being asked to deal with the lack of resources and the failures of other public services.
Yeah, I mean, we can, and failure is an interesting word, isn't it? Or you know, is it a failure or just a system, you know, casualty really? Mental health is a classic example of that. You know, that a huge percentage of police time is spent trying to help and support young people and adults, for that matter, with mental health issues. If there were, you know, if the service was there to be able to pick that referral up and to be able to support that young person, then arguably we wouldn't need to spend as much of our resources in trying to support people with mental health problems. And I think, you know, the frustration of my colleagues is that the thresholds are often so high to access services that, you know, you've got young people in a mental health crisis, and actually they're going to get worse before they get any support, yet actually an earlier intervention would prevent this crisis from escalating. And that's a real frustration. And I don't think it's you know, it's not health services' fault. It's just that mental health is a massive area of expansion, and that actually the support isn't there really.
And particularly at the current time, for young people who have suffered so much over the last 18 months or so, it's been terrible to watch and terrible to witness, and I think will have long-term implications for the well-being, the mental health, physical health too, of and education of young people.
Yeah. Absolutely, and we expect young people to be incredibly resilient, and they are. You know, young people are really resilient, but we you know, stuff happens in their lives, and yet we expect them to just carry on and go and do your GCSEs. And you know, their parents might be going through a divorce, they might have had a bereavement, all sorts of stuff happening in their life, and yet, you know, just carry on, that's okay. And the adults around them are kind of, you know, often falling apart and needing support, and getting support, often getting support in their workplace. But those young people, their support they're getting is often lacking.
Yeah, particularly if they're not in school. I want to ask you about something slightly different, because before lockdown, I went to a conference that Olivia spoke at, and I think I'm sure you were involved in, on sexting. And I was incredibly impressed at the very sensible, calm, humane, thoughtful response of police to the issue of sexting by young people. And when there was quite a lot of media hysteria about it, and everybody's getting very upset, and people tend to reach for punishment first and think about it later and think about what the consequences are. And do the police have what is the sort of is there an official national response to the issue arising from that sort of event and the discussions you had?
Yeah, we've got a kind of a briefing document for policing on how we respond to sexting incidents, because the law it means that it's an offence, and you know, but that law was created way before mobile phones, you know, were put in the hands of young people, and so it's really important within policing that we understand, again, threat, risk and harm, that we understand where we've got somebody who is you know, potentially a potential sex offender, or whether they're young people who are exploring their sexuality, who are, you know, it's relationship currency, what actually is going on here, and actually is that policing's job to kind of work out what's going on. We're not always very good at that, but it's an attempt to try to actually make sure that we don't unnecessarily criminalise young people, and we don't criminalise them for a sexting offence that they will take with them for the rest of their life and cause all sorts of issues. So that's why it was really important that we responded really quickly to try to make sure that the guidance was there, that you know, actually, if we're talking about young people in a relationship, actually doesn't need to come to policing, and the guidance that schools have got is that actually they can deal with that themselves. If it comes to their attention, they can deal with that themselves, unless there are aggravating factors, which mean that there may be some coercion and some behaviour around the edge of that actually means that policing do need to get involved.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, that was a really interesting example of how a police-led, these were way ahead, I think, the rest of the country, and particularly politicians and the media, who got who got very confused and upset about it all. So that's why leadership in the police is so important. Now, the new National Police Chiefs Council lead for children is a commander in the Met, who I don't know, but I will seek her out and have a meeting with her. But she's not a chief constable, which has been the case in the past. And I'm sure she's wonderful. But is that downgrading the importance of children for policing, or am I overreacting?
Well, I think the answer I would give you there is I'm just a PC, Frances, and I've made a difference.
So, well, yes.
On that basis, I think anything is possible if you have the passion and you want to make a difference. And she, will be known as the new lead, and I'm sure, she is passionate about children and young people, and she does want to make a difference. So I'm sure she will be able to do that. And fortunately, it sits within the leadership of Olivia, because it sits within the local policing coordinating committee, which is led by Olivia. So she still has that overarching support of a chief constable who is not only leads Hampshire Police, but the coordinating committee that sits within it as well. So I think it will be fine.
You've allayed my fears. However, Caroline, you are a PC, but with the Queen's Police Medal, which I have to say is quite unusual, because it's usually only given to very, very senior officers. So it is a sign of the importance that you've contributed. Having a QPM is very important. It's very impressive. I just want to sort of tidy things up at the end. There's been a sort of decade of real progress and dramatic improvements, I think, in protecting hundreds of thousands of children and preventing them from getting sucked into the criminal justice system and the penal system. And you've made a fantastic contribution to that. What do we do? How do we make sure this is protected and embedded for the future? What would you recommend that our successors, because as we're moving on to other things, our successors make sure that it's embedded, and the success with regard to children is there for the future?
I think, I suppose one of the things that I am really concerned about is trust and confidence between young people and the police, and that I think has gone downhill recently, certainly within the last 2 or 3 years. And I think we really need to be seen by children and young people as being trustworthy, because they will never trust us, and they will never come forward as victims. They'll never tell us what's going on in their world if they don't trust us. And therefore I think that's what we really need to focus on. And just a bit of a shout out for our national Instagram channel. One of the things that I think we need to do is be in social media. We need to be in young people's space. That's where they told us we needed to be in policing. So we've created the national Instagram channel, yourpolice.uk, and we reach children and young people there, and the team monitor the channel between 9 and 9, 7 days a week. And we engage with young people. We have about 6,000 DMs a month. A lot of young people won't want to follow us because we're a police account, but they reach out and ask for help. They tell it, this is what's happened to me. Is this okay? Is this against the law? Should I do something about this? Can you just, we put a post out about upskirting, and the amount of young people that got in touch with us, girls, who got in touch with us and said, this has happened to me, but I've never thought anyone would listen if I wanted to do something about it. And so we've helped them and encouraged them to report, things which they weren't sure about or knowing how to, because, young people, we say, how do you report something to the police? They won't have a clue how to report something to the police. I think a lot of adults probably don't know. Once you don't need to dial 999, most people are, I don't know what to do. When we ask young people, they say, well, I'll just Google it and find out, what do I do? How do I do it? So being in their space, I think, is really important, and finding a way that young people can tell us and report crime and incidents through social media has got to be the way forward. I think we've got to build back trust and confidence. I think that is really what we've got to really focus on.
I absolutely agree with that. And of course, there are particular groups of young people who find it even more difficult to trust the police, and that's particularly black young boys and girls. And that's a real challenge for the police force to reinstill trust.
It is, and we've got to do something about it, you know, because you know, some of the films that young people are sending us on you know, our channel of incidents and stop and searches that have just been awful. There's no excuse for that. We don't need to be behaving like that. And 99% of police officers are not behaving like that. 99% of police officers are doing a great job, and so that's what we need to really promote to young people.
Yes, absolutely. My last sort of question is I want your advice. What should the Howard League be doing next with regard to children, young people, and policing? Is there something you think that we should be doing that will help the police and help young people?
I mean, I think you do a great job of shining light in dark corners, if I'm honest. You know, first time I met you, I was terrified. And I just thought, oh my goodness, I'm going to be held to account. You're going to ask me all sorts of difficult questions that I won't be able to answer. And you're going to ask me, why are we doing this? And why aren't we doing that? And why haven't we got that sorted? I think it's really helpful. I think it's really helpful having people asking the difficult questions of policing, and being persistent and holding policing to account. I think that's essential, and I think to continue doing that, I think is really what you need. Yeah, absolutely what you need to do.
Well, thank you for that. And it's been really interesting and encouraging. I think very positive. There's a lot of good stuff going on, a lot of good work going on throughout the country. But your career has been an exemplar to other police officers. For those people who are listening and participating, there's been some chat, and we may respond to that, and we will put the little map up somewhere and get that to you. And if you're not already a member of the Howard League, you should join, because we don't take money from the government, so we rely on donations and membership and support. So please do join us. Look at our website and join us. We'll be having other events again in the forthcoming months. I'm going to be around for the next 3 months or so, and I hope to do more events like this. But thank you very much, Caroline. It's been a pleasure, and I don't want to lose touch with you when we retire, so we will keep in touch. But thank you for your career and your achievements. It's been really fantastic to work with you, and I'm very grateful that you took time to have this conversation with me today. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. I like to chat.
I'm pleased. Thank you, everybody, for taking part. Thank you.